Today we'll be talking about why we should challenge and enter the APAC market. My name is Siavash Kampor. I'm Business Development Manager here at Intralink, North America. I'm based in Toronto and spent the past 2 years with Intralink connecting Western technology companies with the ecosystem out in APAC. And previous to that, I spent 5 years leading engineering software business development activities for a company here in Canada. I'm joined here by our SVP, Head of Business Development for North America, Tommy Sheikman. Tommy has worked in Asia for really his entire career. Spent a number of years, over a decade, in our Intralink China office, connecting Western technology companies into China's ecosystem across various stakeholders. And in 2017, he relocated to Silicon Valley to really drive and lead our North American growth for our business development activities across Canada and US. So at a glance, we are a business development consultancy specializing in international growth. We were founded 35 years ago. We're about 180 people worldwide, founded in Oxford, UK. And our growth is to accelerate your transition through a low-risk way to the APAC markets. Really, we're focused on enabling tech across a variety of sectors: sustainability, mobility, high-tech, life science, energy, materials, and many deep tech sectors that need on-the-ground presence in Asia. We've completed a number of projects, assignments for many scale-ups, small and medium-sized businesses, multinationals, and government agencies as well. So we have a few service lines. Tommy and I really cover our international market expansion services, which is helping a lot of the audience here today. So if you're a tech scale-up or SME, we'll help you really find those early customers out in APAC. We have another arm called International Corporate Development, where we're helping APAC multinationals, the Toyotas of the world, for example, tech scout and do pilot projects with Western startups and scale-ups out in Europe and North America. And then our other service line is international trade investment, where we'll support nonprofits, government EDOs with trade missions, with matchmaking services, finding buyers out in market for their missions, and as well on the reverse side, helping with FDI, foreign direct investment into their local states or provinces and territories. We're across all these geographies. We have 180 staff, 120 of them sit out in Asia, and then the other 60-odd staff sit out in North America and in Europe. As I was kind of lightly covering in the other slide, we cover many of these sectors, everything from energy, industrial, chemicals, development, mobility, etc. Really any sector that needs a lot of on-the-ground presence and sector experts to really drive that commercial expansion with your suppliers, partners, and target customers in market. Over 35 years, we've done really business met with over 100,000 people, with 70,000 contacts out in Asia, 30,000 in EMEA and US. Know a number of decision makers, all the way from CEO to VP, technical directors, and really cover every lot throughout the supply chain, the value chain, from startups all the way to multinationals with contacts throughout. And really everything is accessible through our database as well. So looking at how we work, it's really a progressive loop here, coming in, really targeting the Western innovators, so the deep tech companies, for example, helping them with their market strategy in the early stages, all the way to generating those local partnerships on the ground, to ramping up sales with early wins, to helping them with their growth, which we'll cover in the later slides, whether that's setting up an office, hiring a country manager, hiring a local distributor, and etc. This will ultimately get you in with those big multinationals that you're trying to target and work with, which will ultimately drive back into their interest in the Western side with Western innovators through strategy, collaboration, doing pilot projects, and ultimately investing in potentially acquiring a business. So it's a progressive loop that our business is completely involved in across the two service lines, three service lines really that I covered previously. Now I'll hand it off to Tommy to really cover on really the opportunities on why we should enter the APAC market.
Great. Thanks, Siavash, and thank you everyone for tuning in on a Friday. Appreciate everyone doing so. A few familiar faces in the crowd, so good to connect and or reconnect. So I'm going to talk just for a few minutes about some high level points about Asia, the overall opportunity there. And then at the end of that, I'm going to cover a few tangible market entry strategies that any company, be it a Canadian startup, a Canadian scale up, or even perhaps a not-for-profit, be it on the university or government side, can use to enter the Asia markets. But Asia itself, stating the obvious, it's a very, very important region in the world. It represents a massive population base, 60% of the world, and therefore a lot of problems within that very small landmass. You're talking about problems that are due to the number of people, things like pollution, things like energy usage and demand response, things like how do we electrify the grid with sustainable fuels, that kind of thing. We also have challenges that are more socioeconomic, some of which are associated with perhaps aging populations in places like Japan and South Korea, declining populations in places like China due to some societal factors, you name it. So Asia has a lot of inherent challenges and therefore a lot of intrinsic opportunities for companies that are brave enough to go out and not only sell to and pitch to, but actually go through the journey of securing deals with the big corporates out there. And there's many, many big corporates. Almost half of the world's Fortune 500s are sitting out somewhere in Asia. Between China, Japan, and India, you have three top global economies and a massive manufacturing hub. We know China, for the better part of 25 years, was dubbed the world's factory. China today still is a massive manufacturer. It's the leading manufacturing country in just about any category you can dream up. However, places like Southeast Asia are slowly eroding China's market share, and therefore it's a region that we shouldn't forget about when we're looking at bringing in new manufacturing technologies, be it on the robotics and automation side or otherwise. But very much a developing region, very much a dynamic region, in one where it's not a one-size-fits-all strategy for the whole region, of course. Next slide, please. So Asia in particular, if we kind of look at its trajectory, the countries and regions that were once unable to afford Western technologies and Western goods and services are now able to do so. We have rising GDPs across the board. China and India in particular have very quickly urbanizing populations, meaning that people are demanding higher quality goods and services, products, and therefore technologies. And Southeast Asia in particular is the fastest growing benefactor of a rising middle class population. As mentioned, you have highly aging populations in Japan and Korea. That leads to massive headaches in the country and massive opportunity for Canadian technology companies. MedTech, life sciences being an obvious area where if you have technologies that can address aging populations and the needs that they need from a medical perspective, great. But with a lack of workers, there's massive gaps within society that technology companies can seek to fill. And that can be things like automation technologies, that can be robotics technologies, anything including digital transformation, where once manual processes are now done in digital ways and therefore fewer people are required to do that. All very important, all of massive need, not within a single vertical, but actually across multiple horizontals. It's a continent and an area where there's tons of competition. So anecdotally, many know China is the world's largest automotive market. It's the world's largest electric vehicle market, with more than 50% of the world's EVs made today in China. But how do you attack a place like China in terms of automotive business, for example, when there's more than 80 companies that, at least on paper, are making um, cars, many of which are electric vehicles. So just because there's 80 targets doesn't mean that a Canadian company should talk to all 80. So it's about understanding the market, understanding which ones are perhaps most inclined or most experienced working with Canadian startups, and therefore triaging the market in the right way. Um, and also, the last comment I'll make is that just because there's a company sitting in Asia doesn't mean the opportunity and the ultimate customer is in Asia. And a few anecdotal pieces of evidence, there's Toyota North America, of course. Just because there's a North America operation for Toyota doesn't mean you can go to the US and simply do a deal there. Actually, a lot of the work has to be done in Japan. So there is certainly a push-pull between the Asia headquarters and the branch offices and branch factories around the world. And as an extension of that, we have Korean companies, as an example, that are doing construction projects all over the world, that are doing automotive sales all over the world. So therefore, it's about actually going into headquarters, having those discussions, but at the end of the day, recognizing that initial deployment or implementation might be in a market outside of Asia. Next, please. Just very quickly, we could probably spend a good hour on this slide, guys. There is a lot to cover here, and we certainly won't do so, but really high level, Asia has intrinsic, what I would call core verticals and core markets within each of the countries. And just to kind of go through it very quickly, China, as mentioned, but also Japan, Korea are very much the automotive and mobility hubs in Asia. But that's not to say that India isn't soon behind. And in fact, in India, we have a rising two-wheeler market, as we do in Indonesia. Better and better cars. It's not just the $8,000 or $10,000 car being sold in India, but higher end cars are being sold there as well. But again, back to my comments on the last slide, the best selling car in India is actually a joint venture between Maruti and Suzuki, a Japanese OEM. So again, are those decisions made if you want to license in a battery management system into that EV? Is that going to be done in India, or is that going to be done in Japan? And in many cases, it's a combination. Clean tech is a big, big part of what we do. That's pretty much a need across the board in Asia. Semiconductors, again, and that dabbles into embedded software and AI. Certainly, that's a Northeast Asia play. China, Taiwan, and South Korea, absolutely. But Japan, in fact, is rebounding quite a bit. So, rewinding probably to the middle stage of Intralink's 35 years in the early 2000s, a lot of what we were doing in semiconductors was in Japan. And then Japan kind of fell off the map and China began to rise up, as did South Korea. But Japan today is clawing back hard. We have companies like Denso that are making chips. We have companies, for example, Rapidius, which is a government kind of funded and backed semiconductor fab that's bubbling up. And then we have TSMC that has actually announced and has started construction on an extremely large fab in Japan, alongside its fab here in the US in Arizona. MedTech, again, across the board, but the aging populations and overpopulations are big opportunities. And then anything digital, which includes, of course, things like digital media and ad tech, or any sort of digital transformation technology, be it in financial services and banking. China, absolutely big, big market. But again, you have to understand the localization challenges. Japan, India, certainly big opportunities in those areas as well. So I'll keep it there for this particular slide, but when we open it up to Q&A or after the fact, if anybody does have specific questions about their product and technology and where it might best map within Asia, we're obviously happy to answer those questions and bring in colleagues to support us. Next slide, please. So just very quickly, and we'll talk about some of this in the Q&A session, but Japan is not just a buyer of technologies, it's also an investor into technologies. And Korea, equally, we could have a compelling slide on the Korea story as well, but we've selected Japan in this case. Japan is an extremely active investor, both in terms of CVC, so the corporate VC arms of big, big companies, such as Toyota, as an example, and pretty much any other of the top 50 or 60 Japanese companies you could imagine. Pretty much all of them have some sort of VC operations. And in some cases, it's an off-balance sheet investment that they might make. Why is this happening? First of all, Japan has a very, very fiscally conservative management policy. So the Japanese, generally speaking, and this is why they were so successful during some of the dips and valleys of the COVID pandemic, they had a lot of cash on hand, and therefore they were able to weather the storms. And the Japanese government, in part, as well as some of the big corporates, are looking around the world and realizing two things, maybe three things. Number one, we're running out of people in Japan to do the R&D, and we need people to support us. Number two, we have a big, big neighbor right to our west in China, and the Chinese government is investing billions and billions of dollars to not only research but compete and beat places like Japan and Korea with next generation technologies. And then last but not least, we have strong tech hubs in North America, places like Toronto and Vancouver and Calgary, Silicon Valley, obviously, and Boston as well here in the US. And the companies there, they're innovating quickly and they're addressing many of the problems that places like Japan and Korea have. And therefore, Japanese corporates not only want to partner with these companies and perhaps buy in and license the technologies, but in many cases, they actually will want to invest in these companies. And that, generally speaking, just to give a few hard numbers, is in a Series A or a Series B. So not when the technology is at a good idea, but when it's already been productized. And the second comment I'll make before we move on is that the investment made by typically Japanese and Korean and other Asian CVCs is not a lead investment unless it's a late round, usually Series C and beyond. But for A and B, generally speaking, they're a follow-on investor to the tune of around $3 to $6 million US is what we generally see, but it could be slightly higher or lower, obviously. So I just wanted to paint a bit of a picture there in terms of what that might look like for anybody who is considering getting potential investment out of Asia. And the last comment I'll make before we go to the next slide is that if your technology isn't being assessed by that company today, the likelihood of them investing in you is perhaps slightly lower because generally speaking, the investment team wants to know, are you engaged with product planning? Are you engaged with open innovation? Are you engaged with R&D, et cetera? And if the answer to that is not yet, then your first port of call very well might be those groups before you talk to the investment team. So moving ahead, thanks, Sivesh. On to the next slide. We're going to talk just about a few different strategies that a Canadian company can use to enter the Asia markets. This is by no means comprehensive. This is by no means a one size fits all. And each company will have its own pain points, its own challenges. And obviously, we're happy to talk one-on-one about any specific situation or ideas you might have. But in terms of just a few different options that you could make, the first would be obviously you could set up your own office in that country. So you could go into China and set up what's called a WFOE, a wholly foreign-owned enterprise, or go into Japan and set up a KK, or go into Singapore and set up an entity. And different countries have different investment criteria. China, on one extreme, is quite financially burdensome, and the paperwork, again, is slightly more comprehensive. A place like Singapore or Hong Kong, very, very quick, a few thousand Canadian dollars, and you can pretty much have an entity spun up in short order. But the question I would always ask to anybody who is planning that is, why would you take that route without having customers secured? And as an extension to that, many people will say, well, we've been told we need to invoice in the local currency, be it Japanese yen or Chinese RMB or whatever it is. And my response to that, just for anybody who's encountered that situation, is generally number one, you should find a customer before you set up an office. And number two, the right customer for a Canadian company to sell to will be accustomed to working in the Forex of your choice, be it CAD or USD or something else. So that's my comment there. You could always find a channel partner, which could wear the hat of a reseller or a systems integrator or a distributor. In other words, they buy for $1 or sell for $2, or they take your technology and they bundle it with other technologies. and they put it onto the factory floor or whatever it is. And I can't tell you how many companies in a given week, Siavash and myself and others at Intralink are talking to where they say, we have gone to Asia because a company met us at a trade show, or they approached us through our contact form, and we're going to work with them because they are free of charge and they've offered to sell our technology to big companies in Asia. And in exchange, we're giving them exclusivity because they're the best choice that we have to date. And we hope they bring in some big deals for us. And the real reality of this is that it's quite hard. It's not to say that it can't happen, but it's quite challenging. And some of the challenges we see come down to number one, their network, and number two, their mind share. So in that order, who actually is this partner? What is their network? And if you haven't visited their offices, I would caution you to signing any agreement with anybody on the ground in Asia. Get in there, look at their offices, see if the number of desks matches what they say that they have in their PowerPoint and on the website. Go and talk to some of the customers that they claim they're selling to and they're deeply entrenched with. And if those customers have never heard of this partner, or they say they're not doing too much work with them, again, I would raise that as a massive red flag. And then the third thing to understand is who actually at that distributor or SI or reseller will be working on your behalf. Is it a young college graduate who perhaps studied abroad in the US for a year and speaks better English than anybody else on the team? Or is it somebody who actually has deep technical and commercial experience to lead your business? And in many cases, we find that the person working, quote unquote, or dedicated, quote unquote, from that partner is actually number one, not technically or commercially savvy. And number two, perhaps more importantly, they're focused on other things, which is their existing book of business where they're guaranteed sales and guaranteed commissions, and therefore that's where they want to spend their time. So again, you should understand what is the mind share about that. And last but not least, if you don't have a lead customer, they're probably not going to trust your technology. So generally speaking, we would tell companies in that position, you need to find that lead customer somewhere in Asia through either your own hard work, a company like Intralink, or an inbound that leads to a piece of business or whatever. But without that, we strongly believe that it's going to be quite challenging for you to do a deal and have a sustainable business with a channel partner. Another way that we can help companies or companies can help themselves grow operations in Asia is through a manufacturing joint venture or a sales joint venture or white labeling your product or technology. Again, that takes a degree of upfront investment in many cases. And if you don't have a lead customer to underpin that investment, it's going to be quite challenging to justify making that significant investment. And that lead customer doesn't have to be a paid account. I think, as we're mentioning here, a strong indication of commitment is a really strong bargaining chip in any joint venture. And that could be you doing your own market research and having direct customer feedback, but perhaps even better, if not a paid PO, a letter of intent, a memorandum of understanding, or something that's a written piece of customer commitment that they're interested and willing to buy your technology, assuming you can manufacture locally or assemble locally or whatever it is out in Asia. So again, having that commitment will help with your bargaining. And just to quickly talk about JV structure and what we can see, obviously you want to have as much control over that JV as possible without losing your IP. What we often will suggest is forming a JV whereby the Western company, their give into the partnership is technology, and the Asian side, their give is not only the factory space, if it's a manufacturing JV or a sales JV, but also the human capital as well. So it's the network and the compliance and the finance and the salespeople and everything else. And then last but not least, you could go out and you could hire your own team and your own operations. That could be a technical salesperson, that could be a country manager, but
Quel message? Ton message que tu me dis que tes collègues font en moyenne 5 projets par année.
I'm just gonna thank you for muting whoever that was. Yeah, so back to that. So you could obviously have your own boots on the ground in Asia, but again, I would caution that we have to be cautious with our money. And again, why would you make that investment without a lead customer? So there are organizations that exist out there, some of them through the Canadian government, of course, and others through companies like Intralink. We're not the only one, but we've been at it for a long, long time, who could help you go out and assess your market opportunity and actually meet with customers on your behalf to not only engage with and generate understanding, but actually secure your first logos. And I would tell anybody that wants to set up an entity and hire a team, you absolutely should, but you should do a bit of groundwork before you go through that journey. So that's just some very high level go-to-market options. Siavash, I'll hand it back to you to talk through a few case studies.
Thanks, Tommy. Yeah, so after hearing about how to go to the market, I'd like to share some of the work that we've done with some example companies. So here's Nuvo, the Canadian company based out of Montreal. They were an IoT analytics software company, and we helped them in Korea and Japan. They had a smart factory software that was really targeting different sectors, all the way from HVAC manufacturing to agri-tech, so thinking about agricultural machines, to manufacturing and industrial facilities, and also smart home applications as well. So they developed a platform that was called Smart Objects, and we helped them ramp it up and ran commercial deals with Johnson Controls, Hitachi, Yanmar, and a few IT companies, IT/system integrators such as NS Solutions and ITS. Ultimately, their presence grew pretty big, and they were acquired by US-based AspenTech. There's another company here, Ceres Power, based in the UK, in the energy space, and we were appointed for their work in Korea. And ultimately, they knew that they were licensing solid oxide and fuel cells and fuel cells, and they were looking to license that design out to the big fuel cell companies out in Korea. Ceres knew that Korea's hydrogen economy was going in the right direction, and they currently had an existing base of partners, but they came to us to really revamp that partner base and land commercial deals. So we worked with them for a long period, and ultimately we helped them land a deal with Doosan to go develop fuel cell systems. It was a 55 million plus USD deal, and ultimately led to more work where they were able to use those wins to secure more deals in other neighboring APAC markets. Ekion Technologies, another UK-based company, where we're currently still supporting them in these markets, and they build niobium anode battery materials for lithium-ion batteries, and really lead the battery market out in Asia. They came to us, and we were appointed as the business development team in these three markets, all separate teams in market that we appointed on their behalf to secure early wins with material transfer agreements. We're able to send some of their samples for testing to CATL, LG Energy, all the big battery makers across these Northeast Asian markets. We're currently working with them and really trying to progress that commercial development throughout their business development cycle, from MTAs to more larger commercial deals. So how do we take it forward? There are a number of, I'd like to highlight here a number of grants that Canadian companies are entitled to if they were to engage with and consider working with Intralink. As many of you know, these are, I'm sure, just sort of reiterating them at this point. But there's Can Export, where it's mean for Canadian companies. You have to be small, mid-size, no less than 100K declared revenue in the past fiscal year, or for anyone who does quarterly filers, past four quarters or past 12 months. It's really made for securing new opportunities in the international markets. and you can file a project anywhere between 20,000 CAD to 100,000. And this can cover anything from travel, trade show fees, marketing, consulting fees, legal, where we could support as part of that engagement. There's also the Canadian International Innovation Program, which is more focused on developing R&D partnerships, and they fund partnership development activities, PDAs, to really identify those foreign partners that can lead to R&D projects. And then they fund the co-innovation projects, so the implementation of that foreign of that R&D with a foreign partner. This can really include anything from technology adaptation to validation, co-development. So really kind of have the sort of all three different areas. Anything from understanding how to configure your technology to the foreign market, validating it, making sure that there's commercial viability, or ultimately co-developing it. So doing more R&D with a joint partner that has that necessary expertise that you're looking for. These are all programs that we could potentially support our services under, be supported under. I'm happy to take it offline with anyone that's interested to discuss further. We're now going to open it up to a few question and answers. So, which I'll hand it back to Tommy here. So we'll ultimately thank everyone for listening into this, and hand it back to Tommy to answer a few questions that were pre-recorded by the audience.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Siavash. So I think as Melissa mentioned, if anyone does have questions, I think in just a minute you can put them in the chat and or shout them out in a few. But a few of you did put some questions in the sign-up form, so I'm just going to quickly blitz through a few of those and then open it up to the room. But number one, in terms of funding and partnership opportunities, so as mentioned, there are the programs that Siavash mentioned on the last slide. Partnership opportunities, I'm not specifically sure what is meant by this, but certainly anybody could partner with a company out in Asia. But again, some of these are through government programs where perhaps there's a mission or otherwise that goes out to Asia. But certainly it's all about either getting funding or getting partnership, and hopefully that partnership is in the form of joint development or some sort of commercial agreement as well. So there's both kind of the public sector and the private sector routes to do so. In terms of how others are being successful and where, that is certainly, I would say, it comes down to customization. So what is your product? What is your business model or your technology? Where do you see the opportunities in Asia? Where are Asian companies knocking on your door from? Because I would expect most of you are going to events and trade shows, and if you have a stand, are companies from Japan or China or India or wherever. If they're knocking on your door, maybe perhaps those are the markets you should start in specifically. But I would say to be successful, the most obvious and important thing you can do is get on an airplane to Asia. And if you're not prepared to do that, I would say you're not prepared to sell to a company out there, bluntly put. In terms of matchmaking, yes, we do. We absolutely treat this as part of our service. We do it in a number of ways. Number one, we work with the Canadian government and in some cases, provinces and industry associations to do their matchmaking out in Asia. So many of you, if you've done like the Canadian clean tech, I think it was, what was the official name, Siavash? Can you remember a year ago?
It was the clean tech mission to South Korea.
That's correct. Yeah, the mission. Thank you. So that was Intralink was running that, and we were coordinating the matchmaking activities on behalf of that mission. So that was B2B matchmaking. We just did Bio Japan last week. We did a number of matchmaking initiatives for a few economic development organizations and their member companies. We also do matchmaking in the reverse direction. So in other words, Asia into the West. We do that in many cases representing our Japanese Korean, Chinese, Indian corporate clients who will say to us, Intralink, we're looking for a next generation technology that does A, B, and C. Can you help us to find that? And in many cases, the companies they're looking for aren't late stage series A, B, C scale ups, but they're in fact very, very early stage companies that have just spun out of university lab or have just secured their pre-seed or seed funding, but the idea and the core technology that underlies is there. Next question about hydrogen. I mean, gosh, we could go and talk about this for another 30 minutes. There's a ton of resource on our website, in fact, about hydrogen, including some free to download market reports that we've done over the last 2 or 3 years that I would encourage anyone interested to look at. But hydrogen to me is a massive growth area in Asia. We're working today with a Canadian company, in fact, that does e-methanols and e-fuels, and we're helping them to target offload agreements in some of the ports and marine shipping applications. In fact, Asia, high level, is a net importer of energy. Places like Japan and Korea need energy just to run their country, so they're importing it from North America and Australia and other places because, simply put, the clean tech infrastructure isn't there for renewables to run the country, and they don't have enough domestic resources to do so. So that's a big, big area of need. Next question about validating commercial opportunities across Asia before making significant investments. And most of the time, companies are missing out because they're not asking the right questions. So the question I would always ask is, what team, if you're approached by a big Asian corporate, are you talking to? And in many cases, because of the fact that they're sitting in Korea or whatever, and you're sitting in Canada, that team is a team that's accustomed to working with foreign companies, and that team is often called open innovation. And open innovation to us is a useful window and contact point to saying, here is the 50,000-foot view of our company and how it looks from the Asia perspective, and here's what our really cool startup does from the Canadian perspective. But very, very seldom does the open innovation team have any budget whatsoever. And the real question I would ask is, who in fact has the budget, who in fact is making the decision, and who has the pain point, most importantly. And that's the team you need to focus on. So the team, generally speaking, that is on product planning or product development, it could be R&D, it could be under the CTO's office, it could be advanced R&D, but somebody who has that pain point and therefore is willing to go through the technical evaluation journey with you. And in many cases, we're asked about Intralink's network and do we sell top down, or how does it work? And do you have any contacts that can help? And the reality is we start top down with our highest senior contacts in R&D, for example, but most of the time and most of the selling we do is in the lab, in fact, and it's engineer who are making the real decisions, ticking the technical boxes, and therefore telling their management that, yes, this is the technology we believe in because we've been ripping it apart in the lab and poking holes in it left, right, and center, and actually it stands up, and therefore we should buy it. And so the question I would always ask is who in fact is making those decisions. And then final question, and I think a few others have popped up in the chat, but about university-based startups and their evolution from the lab. Yeah, really good question. I would say most of our clients are spin-outs from either a big corporate or a university lab today. And some of our clients, for example, are spinning out of things like Cambridge, where we have a big UK Cambridge, that would be with a big semiconductor ecosystem, or US Cambridge, where there's a huge MIT ecosystem, as well as the Canadian equivalents, of course. So absolutely, that's really important. Most of the companies that spin out of the lab, by nature, they're young, and that's okay, but they have the reputation because they spun out of really important universities. So anybody who is in that position, I would say front and center in your slide deck under About Us, you should include the university credentials of the management team, because those are universities that Asians will have heard of, and that gives you a lot of reputation just right out of the gates. And let's see, I do see a few questions here. I'm happy to jump in. The first one is about restrictions and opportunities for dual use. Siavash, maybe I'll hand that back to you. Sia is spending a heck of a lot of time in defense and aerospace, so maybe that's one you can take on.
Yeah, I mean, for dual use work, work with a number of companies and clients that have targeted some of the countries that are less sensitive, let's say. So a lot of our work coming out of North America from North America from, let's say, tech companies that have dual use applications. We'll encourage them to work mostly in Japan and Korea. And really, these are kind of self-implied regulations that will not allow them to work in some of those sensitive areas such as China. But not to say that if you're targeting those countries for other applications that are commercial applications, it's fine to do so. We work with a company based out of the US that sold kind of counter UAS systems, and we help them into Korea. So really, the regulations are really based off really kind of self-implied by the local policy from the government. But not to say that commercial work, we can't work in those countries where maybe the government has regulations around doing work for defense export, such as into China.
Yeah, thanks, Siavash. They're just scrolling through here, a plug and a link for the Deep Tech Canada mission. Yeah, everyone sign up. Looks really cool. Down to the next question about exclusivity when dealing with Asian agents. So, number one, I would always caution against exclusivity. Why would you give it? Would be the first question. It has to be earned, is kind of a very common phrase. And I would agree with that common phrase. You have to earn exclusivity. Even if somebody comes to you with an amazing purported Rolodex of companies and contacts, you should absolutely tell them, great, if you really are that good, make those introductions, help me do some business. And then, assuming you do so and you hit whatever threshold or milestone you think is a good win for your business in that country, then you can have that exclusivity discussion, but I wouldn't do so a day before that. And for any company on this call that has an innovative technology, it might feel like when you go to Asia, you are the one who is on the back foot because you're talking to big companies with more engineers in the division you're selling to than in your entire business. And so, my gosh, we need to bow to them. And actually, no, I would flip it the other way and say, these are companies, if you go to any sort of pitch day or demo day, it's full of Asian companies looking at hot technologies from Canada. So, in fact, I think you guys are in the driver's seat. And I would just remember that when you walk in there, you're the ones who have the technology they need. Of course, they're the ones with the deep pockets you need. But by all means, I would not be afraid to play a bit of hardball with the right company. And let's face it, if you're talking to Toyota, you should probably talk to Nissan and Honda and Suzuki and Mitsubishi and everybody else. And so therefore, I just think you should always go in with that attitude of they need me as much as I need them sort of thing. And the last question I see here about this is specific to consumer electronics and enabling companies to connect to ODMs, which for those who don't know is a original design manufacturer. So somebody who's making a cell phone or a headset or whatever to somebody's design, an OEM, which would be, in my view, a company like Samsung or Huawei or Apple, instead of end product companies. And I don't know, Jad, if you're still on this call, if you wouldn't mind getting off mute, just so I can understand specifically what you're asking here, if that might be useful.
Yes. So my question is, instead of targeting, let's say, an LG or Samsung company, what if we want to sell a software to one of those companies that sells back to LG and Samsung, like let's say for a headset, software that runs on a headset? Like, do you enable putting us in contact with those ODMs instead of going and targeting specifically an LG or Samsung, a direct-to-consumer company?
Understood. Yeah, thank you for clarifying. So the short answer is yes, absolutely. And for any company that wants to sell to a Samsung or LG or Xiaomi or whoever, you should absolutely talk to them, but you should absolutely talk to their manufacturers as well in their ecosystem. So that could be a company like Foxconn as well. What we generally see is that decisions, in fact, are made by the end product companies. They're the ones who are saying to their suppliers and to their manufacturers, this is the product I want, please make it, as opposed to you going into an ODM or a company like Foxconn saying, we have this really cool AI software, this really cool nano coding, and that can make a phone waterproof or whatever. And can you help us to push this to your customers? And they will kind of look at it and say, this is cool and good to know about, but actually our customers are driving what they need and we're just following and taking orders. So that's generally what I would say the ecosystem looks like.
Yeah, just to add to that, we definitely support across the entire supply chain from OEMs to contract manufacturers, electronic manufacturing service providers, really based off what your target is.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Feel free to raise your hand and then we can call on you as well. Go
All
ahead,
right.
Chris.
Yeah, hey everybody. Thanks again, Melissa and Janice, for putting it on. Thomas, Shivash, nice to meet you guys. What are your thoughts on advising companies to potentially meet with like North American subsidiaries of these kind of major companies in APAC, as opposed to as like a first step and then going into the kind of markets, or vice versa? Do you just go right to the source? What are your thoughts on that? You kind of touched on it on the presentation a little, but just thinking if you could elaborate.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it. So thank you for doing so. Absolutely. In North America, California, as an example, I think a market report we read from JETRO, which is the Japanese External Trade Organization, in California said there's something like 800 or 900 Japanese companies in the stretch of land between San Francisco and San Jose, which is pretty much Silicon Valley. And so everybody's there. And they have a primary remit, as I think you're indicating, of kind of assessing and working with and cooperating with North American startups. And so, as you say, that's a really good initial contact window for you to get a high level data point and view of what that company's doing and their activities. But what that individual and team in California, or it could be Canada or elsewhere, really lacks is two things. It's number one, a budget, and it's number two, an actual project, because all the projects are being driven and implemented by headquarters. And so you're very, very welcome to talk to those companies. I would always encourage it as a good set of data points to say, like, yeah, we've talked to 10 Japanese companies in the US and they're all interested in what we're doing. But the best you're going to get, in my opinion, I'm afraid, is an invitation to go out to Asia to meet with somebody either on their team, but at headquarters, or perhaps the CTO's office. And assuming you do go through that journey and you do on your own go and set up that week of meetings and you go out to Asia, the best you're going to get from that is, this looks great, when are you coming back? And that's where the challenge starts. And so in my view, that's when you need to have a strategy and a plan in place, because unless you're really prepared to every 3 weeks get on an airplane to Asia and go through that sales cycle on the ground, I think you're going to struggle to do that big deal. So kind of end to end, that's the simplified view of how I would think about it. I do see one question at the bottom about South America. Thank you for that question. Appreciate it. So we are global market entry. As you mentioned, today we don't have direct teams and offices in South America, but we have a network of consultants and partners that we work with in the region. And so for anybody interested in South America, happy to pick up that discussion offline.
Any further questions? Okay, I have one. If they're looking to connect with Intralink, who is their contact point?
Next slide, please.
So either or, you can reach out to myself, Tommy. We both cover Canada, and really overlap in some of the in a lot of similar sectors. So feel free to reach out to either of us. Be happy to pick it up.
Yeah, to take that further, yeah, please connect with us on LinkedIn. Our website has a ton of resources as well, including some published reports that we've done for governments that are sector specific, a ton of different case studies that may or may not resonate depending on your technology or target customers in your ecosystem. And most importantly, out in Asia, we have sector teams and sector experts covering all the technologies where we work and operate. So for anybody with a specific question, either about a technology and or that technology's prospects within one or more of the territories where we operate in Asia, we're happy to put you in touch with the right people on the ground who can answer some of those questions.
So to partially answer the question, I have recorded this webinar, so it'll be up on our website probably by mid next week. So you can watch it there if you want to watch it over. There's a lot of information that's not necessarily in the slides. And then Thomas and Sivesh, are you interested in sharing the slides as well?
Absolutely. What is the best way for us to do so? Is that through you, Melissa?
Yeah, I can do that. I can follow up with everyone and share the presentation with everyone and then share contact details as well.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any final questions? We've got 5 minutes left, so utilize your time. Okay. Well, I guess if no one's interested in any further questions, I want to thank you all for joining us today. That was a really great presentation. Thank you, Intralink. So thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day and happy Friday.
Thank you, Melissa. Thanks everyone for tuning
Thank
in.
you, Melissa.
Happy Friday.
Thank you, everyone.